Well, hello, welcome to the Podcaster Hour. This is very sad. This is the penultimate episode. I love the word penultimate. My name's Ian Gray. Welcome to the Podcaster Hour. This is the show where we help you with your confidence in launching a podcast from your live shows using the power of Ecam Live. Now, live video, I think if you're here, you understand the power of live video. But do you understand the power of podcasting as well? And we're going to be talking about that in today's show, that a lot of people are thinking about launching a live show. That's great. But there's so many other people out there who might not be in the position to watch a live show or just prefer podcasting. So why not do both? Why not launch a live show and a podcast from the same thing? And that's going to be killed so many birds with one stone. That's a horrible thing to say. Anyway, great to see you here. Thank you so much for watching. I can see lots of people watching live here. So let's go through who we've got. We've got Gary Bowen Michael saying, looking forward to another great live cast. Great to see you, Gary. Hope you're doing really well. And we've got, I think this is Melissa watching on my group, saying, hiya, watching on my iPad from sunny Sandbach. And it is. I don't know where it is. What's the weather like where you are in the world? I'm just south of Manchester in the UK. Looking out the window, it is gorgeous. I know that spring is coming. We've got Jermaine Freeman saying, hey, 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 hey. We've got Thomas Job saying, hello from Berlin. How are things going in Berlin? We've got Kristen watching from the beautiful Colorado. And we've got a question from John, which I'll come back I'll come back to in a minute. Janine says, love the countdown. And thank you very much. I'm going to talk to you about the countdown in a minute. Tony is watching from sunny San Jose in California. Do you know what? This time, in fact, today, I would have been in San Diego in California at Social Media Marketing World. But as we all know, that kind of thing is not happening at the moment, unfortunately. We've got Adil watching from Pakistan. Awesome to see you, Adil. Hope you're doing really well. How are things doing in Pakistan? Kombucha is saying good morning to you. Obviously, it depends where in the world you're watching from. If you're in the US, it's morning. It's afternoon for me. We've got Yosia watching from the Philippines. I'm not sure what time it is. Is it quite early in the morning for you, probably? David is watching from Massachusetts. A little cloudy today. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But yeah, life is good. Martin is watching on LinkedIn. So awesome to see you, Martin. Hope you're doing really well. And yeah, Kombucha says, oh, good day, rather. Might not be morning where you are. That's okay. And we've got John watching from Minnesota. So awesome. Great to see you here. What I'd love today is if you could ask your questions, ideally to do with podcasting or audio in particular, but it could be more general. They can be live video as well. But this is the Podcaster Hour, so it would be great to talk about that today. Oh my goodness, it is apparently 12:03 a.m. in the Philippines. That is very keen of you to be up at that time, way past my bedtime. Awesome. Right, well, that's the live element of the show. We're going to get onto the main bit. What we tend to do is we cut out the middle bit, the beginning bit for our replay audience. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'll be with you just after this. Hello, my name's Ian Gray, and this is the Podcaster Hour. This is the penultimate episode. Today we're going to be answering your questions to do with podcasting and audio. So we'll be with you just after this.
Welcome to the Podcaster Hour from Ecam, helping entrepreneurs, business owners, and live streamers launch a podcast with success using the power of Ecam Live. Grow your audience and expand your reach, and learn how to plan, promote, produce, and repurpose your live show and podcast. Here's your host, Ian Gray.
Hello, awesome to be here. My name's Ian Gray, and I'm the host of the Podcaster Hour, if I can speak correctly, broadcasting on Ecam Network, YouTube and Facebook, and also on my channels as well, because, you know, why not? Multi-streaming is an awesome thing to do. So today is the penultimate episode of the Podcaster Hour, and it's all about answering your questions. Now, just to say, This was supposed to be Mark Asquith coming on, talking about how to promote your podcast and also about podcast hosting. He was actually going to be last week, but I had a few technical problems. Won't bore you with the details, but we're hoping that Mark Asquith is going to come on next Monday to talk about how you can promote your podcast and about podcast hosts. And Mark Asquith is the founder and CEO of CAPTIVATE FM, which is the podcast host that I use. So I hope you can join us next week. Hopefully I can sort out my tech problems. But yeah, today is answering your questions when it comes to podcasting. And I'd love to know, have you launched your podcast yet? Do you have a standalone podcast? Or have you launched a podcast from your live shows using some of the techniques and tips that I've been talking about on this show? Or maybe you haven't yet and there's something blocking you, something stopping you. Well, I'm here to help you. This has been my plan all along. This is why I've come on the show, because I want to help you launch your podcast from your live show. So you've got a standalone podcast, or you've launched a podcast from your live show, or you haven't yet. And I'd love to know. Pop it in the comments, whether you're watching live or the replay. I would love to know from you. Now, I can see we've got some awesome people watching. So let's have so this is an unrelated question. It's not to do with podcasting, but I had to answer this. So John is asking, love the countdown graphic. Is that available somewhere, or is it something you created yourself? And the answer to that is yes, I created that myself. Now, if you're watching the replay, you probably wouldn't see this. So I'll just play 5 to 10 seconds off the countdown so you can see what this is. So we've got that, and then also at the end, it kind of goes bigger. So this is not really to do with podcasting, but I'm a big fan of countdowns at the beginning. The reason I think countdown timers are great for live shows is it gives time for your live audience to join. It creates a bit of excitement. Now, if you're like Luria Petrucci, then you can dance along to it as well. I'm not really into that myself, but I think it just creates a bit of time. It also allows you to get into the chat and comment and things like that. So I've done that myself. Now, what you can do in Ecam is you can actually create your own countdown. So I can create, for example, this is a very simple one, but I've just added that there. So that's pretty cool. You can do that. And that's how I would start. So just maybe have a static image and then put a countdown on top of that. That's the easiest way to do it. Now, what I did is I actually found that countdown template. It was a paid one. I can't remember where it is. It's on one of these paid platforms where you can download templates. The name will come to me in a minute. So it's actually, technically, it's an After Effects template, which was a bit scary, but I managed to do it. And so that's there as an overlay on top of my image. And then what I did is I got some music from Epidemic Sound. I uploaded it to this platform, Headliner. So let me just see if I can get this for you. Okay, headliner.app. And what you can do with headliner.app or .app is you can create a waveform. So let's see if I've got it here. I might not be able to find it. Would it be this one? Might not be this one. Let's have a look. And no, it's not this one, but this will actually describe what I'm doing here. So this is a separate project. So what I've done is I've uploaded music, and I've got Headliner to create the waveform here. Okay, so I don't know whether you can hear the music there, but you'll notice I've got a green background there. Now, the green background is because what I want to then do is go into, so the app that I use is ScreenFlow, and then I can remove that green background and make it transparent, and then put that on top of everything else that I've got. So I can have an image at the bottom, or you could add that in Ecam as well. So you can have a transparent overlay, a transparent video, if that makes sense, as an overlay. So that is the answer to your question. Probably far too complicated, but you know what? I'm a geek and I love that kind of stuff. So I hope that kind of answers your question. So now let's have a look, see what else we've got here. Okay, so this is a question from Dawn. This is not so much podcasting, but this is a question regarding audio. So I tried to go live via Creator Studio, but the issue was the audio was out of sync with the video. I'm trying to get Facebook stars, so I have to stream through that. So I believe, yeah, okay. No, I make. So you're not broadcasting. Are you broadcasting via Ecam, or you? Yeah, tell me how you're broadcasting. Or you're broadcasting on your phone? Because the thing here is, if you're broadcasting on your phone, sometimes it can get out of sync, I've noticed. So just a few little tips. If you're wearing, these are actually Bluetooth headphones, but I'm actually plugged in at the moment because Bluetooth can cause a bit of out of sync audio as well with your video. But whatever you're using, so I don't know specifically about your question here because I'd need to know a little bit more, Dawn. But I always recommend restarting your phone, restarting your computer, and just closing down as many apps running in the background as possible, and just start afresh. Do some tests first. So I'd always recommend go live to your profile first. Just test things out first. But I would double check your microphone and your headphones, or if you're just going live from your phone, just check that out. I hope that helps. But I need to know a bit more specifics there. Okay. Question from Joshua Crown. Every time I go to Facebook Live, they need to click the link to allow the audience to podcast their name. So I assume you're talking about here is when you're broadcasting to a Facebook group. So if you're broadcasting to a Facebook page or your profile and someone comments on that, so for example, I can see because I'm broadcasting to a page, you don't have to give permission for me or Ecam Live or Restream or any of these tools to see your name. However, if I was broadcasting to a group, Facebook is for privacy reasons, really. They want you, the commenter, to give permission for a third-party tool like Ecam Live or Restream or whatever to see your name. And so to do that, enable to allow people to do that, we put a link. So actually, Ecam Live puts that link in the group for you, in the group post for you, so that you can click on that and then get the permission. So I hope that kind of makes sense. It's only for groups. Is there any way to remove that permission and just allow automatically the name to be used? Well, if I've understood your question, the answer is no. This is only for Facebook groups, by the way, but this is just Facebook. This is the way they've got it. The only way is that the person has to give their own permission by clicking that link. They only need to do it once. Only once, but yeah, that's unfortunately the case. Deep T asks on YouTube, how do you live stream on so many different platforms simultaneously? And so I'm using Ecam Live, and I've connected that to Restream. Now, Restream is a third-party tool. But what you can do in Restream, it's a separate tool, as I said. You can create an event ahead of time. You can schedule the event to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and also other platforms as well. Although technically, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn are the only platforms where you can schedule ahead of time. And then this is the amazing thing: in Ecam, you connect it to Restream. You connect to your Restream account, and then all those events that you've scheduled ahead of time will appear there. So today, just 10 minutes before I went live, I connected to Restream in Ecam, and then I selected the podcast hour event that I've already scheduled in advance. Because actually this week I'm going live I've got about 4 different live shows I've got scheduled. So I needed to make sure I got the right one. So that's how I do it. There are other ways, there are other services out there, but I use Restream for that. Kristen has a standalone podcast. I'd love to know more about that. And Kristen, have you thought about starting off with a live show and turning that into a podcast? There are pros and cons with this, which we'll talk about later. But I mean, so the advantage with going live, that just producing a podcast, a standalone podcast, is that you don't need to worry about video. And also you can ahead of time, you can plan this so you can batch record. So for example, today I could say record 4 podcast episodes. If I was to do a live show, it wouldn't be so good to produce 4 live shows, one after each other. So that's one advantage with having a standalone podcast. But the advantage with doing it the way I do it, which is live show into a podcast, is first of all, it gets done because you schedule that in advance. Second of all, you get the video, which you can repurpose for later. And it also, I think it's just really that repurposing thing. You've got the video, you've got the audio, you can turn it into a blog. There's all those cool things as well. Brad says, I have a well-established, I assume podcast, once a week podcast. If I want to add a live show, that would be added to, should that be added to the existing podcast or be a standalone show? And so that's a great question, Brad. And it's kind of really up to you what you want to do. In my situation, I started from scratch. And so right from the beginning, I knew it was going to be a live show first, turning into a podcast, then turned into a blog. Those are the 3 stages for me. So live, podcast, blog. In fact, I should get a t-shirt with those 3 words on it because it's so awesome. Now, you already have an established podcast. So the question is it currently working really well? And if so, are you willing to tweak it so that you make it starting off with a live show and turn it into a podcast? Now, the only way really is for me to know more about it and for you to have a think about that. But I just love the advantages of starting off with a live show is that you get it done, you get your live audience, you get your replay audience, you get your podcast audience, you get those 3 different audiences. You can also multi-stream to all those different destinations as well. So yes, you could do a separate show and turn that into a second podcast. Kind of depends on your situation. Then Jermaine says, I've started my podcast, but looking to turn it into a video podcast. So that's great. Awesome. I'd love to know what it is you're thinking of doing there. Now, I want to just make just a few points here. Now, a podcast in my mind is audio only. So the live show element is live video. Then it becomes a replay video. So those are both videos. I wouldn't really call them podcasts, but the next stage is then repurposing that into an audio podcast. And so you've got the video and you've got the audio and you're covering all those bases because, as I said at the beginning, some people love live video. Some people love watching replays of videos. Some people love watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, but some people prefer or are not in the position to watch a live video or a video. For example, you might be driving, you might be washing the dishes or going around the house cleaning or something like that. And so you prefer just the audio side of things. So you've got a whole other audience out there if you think about making it audio only as well. We've got Doc Rock in the house. Awesome to see you, Doc Rock. I hope you're doing well. And Matt is saying, hello, awesome people. Awesome. Wow. Okay. So let's see what else we've got. Now we've got some other questions though. Now Curtis is asking more of a technical question, which I probably won't be able to answer. I think if Doc is still in the house, you could probably answer this. I was going to get a MacBook Pro for my Ecam live streaming machine. I wanted to get a Thunderbolt 3 hub for it and was wondering if you or anyone had experience with the Bridge multi-port hubs. No, I haven't got an experience with that, but hopefully somebody else can help with that. I am thinking of getting a hub. I'm thinking of getting the cold digit one, the Thunderbolt one, but yeah. Sorry I couldn't answer that question. Gary is saying, I think you primarily use StreamYard, but can you tell me the big difference in your opinion between that and Streamlabs? I want to make sure I can easily broadcast on all platforms, including LinkedIn. So actually, I use Restream. That's what I use. And there's also, what's the other one? It's not Streamlabs, but there's the the name it's completely gone out of my head. There's an alternative to Restream. There's a number of different multi-stream platforms. And so what I do is I use Ecam Live and then I connect that with Restream. I love the integration, the way they all work together. Now, if you use a tool like StreamYard, that's a separate tool. It's a web-only platform. Restream, by the way, has Restream Studio. But I personally, I love to use the power of Ecam Live and to do it that way. And that definitely works with LinkedIn. So I hope that helps. Okay. So John says, already launched my video podcast using Ecam Live and multi-stream using Restream into Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. Awesome. That is amazing. Well, keep those questions coming, but I've got some questions ahead of time, which I want to share with you. So this is the first question that I got, which is, what's the reason I should start with a video podcast? My audio only podcast is working just fine. And I've kind of gone over this a little bit, but I just want to go over this a little bit more because, if you've got a standalone audio podcast and it's working just fine, then why bother with all these other things? So just to go over that, the advantage, so with Ecam Live, you could technically broadcast audio only. You could just broadcast with just a static image on the screen and make it all audio. You're broadcasting that live. Or, of course, you don't have to broadcast live at all. You could just use interview mode in Ecam and just record it in your own time. So you don't have to start with live if you don't want to. But I think the advantages in starting live and then repurposing that into an audio is that you get the video for later for repurposing. So as I said, I'm a massive fan of using tools like Headliner, because what I can do is I can then take little snippets from the live show or from the video and then turn that into little audiograms or little snippets, little videos. Now, if you've subscribed to the Ecam Facebook page or the Instagram channel, Ecam's Instagram channel, then you'll see those little snippets that will pop up from time to time. Because this is a video show, you'll notice that we can do all of that. If this was just audio, it would make that much more difficult. People just love video. People love to see you. Podcasting is really, really intimate. There's something amazing about the fact that people plug you into their ears and listen to you for a long time. So, podcasts are sometimes an hour long, but they will listen to you for that length of time. But video is almost more authentic because they're seeing you. You can't fake the way you sound, but you certainly can't fake the way you look either. So I don't know. There's something about that I think about video that is awesome. But I will say, if your audio only podcast is working fine and you're not interested in video, then by all means just stick with that. But you can use Ecam Live, you can record the video and turn it into a podcast and not broadcast live. But you still got that video that you can then repurpose. So I hope that answers your question. Next question, and then I'll come back to the comments. So do keep those questions coming. Okay, are there different ways you can incorporate live video into your podcasting strategy? Yes, there are. So my strategy, as I said, is you broadcast live. That is the live show is the repurposing engine, if you know what I mean. So that's how you start. And from that live video, you can create video snippets or video babies that you can break it up using a tool like Descript or Headliner, and you can upload that to YouTube and Instagram and IGTV, and you can turn it into a podcast and into a blog. That's the way I work. But the other option is to do the podcast as audio only or video and just do it like that. But after the episode has gone out, so say for example your podcast episode goes live every Friday, for example. So later on that day, why not then do a live video where you bring back your guest or you answer people's questions on that podcast episode topic? So that is great. You're building a community. Now, you could use something like Clubhouse, but the great thing about live video is that it's video and people can see you and they can hop on there ask questions and you can answer them on there. It builds that community around your podcast, because podcasting is amazing. I love podcasting. It's such an intimate experience. There's no other platform that allows people that people will listen to for the length of time that they do. But the thing is, with podcasting, it's much more difficult to build a community around it. Live video, you can build a community around it. And so that's what I would do. I would definitely recommend incorporating live video. Either start with a live video or add live video to the podcasting experience. Matt Hass says, Ecam and the Rodecaster Pro are an amazing combo when you live stream video while you're recording a podcast. Just saying. And I totally agree. Now, I've only just in the last three weeks got the Rodecaster Pro. You don't need a Rodecaster Pro to get started with podcasting and live video. I recommend just starting simple. The microphone I recommend is the Samsung QT-U. It's a great microphone. It's a budget microphone. It's dynamic microphone, so the quality is pretty good. It's got an XLR output and USB, so you can plug it directly into your computer. It's a great way to start. But as you want to level things up, the thing about the Rodecaster Pro is that it has these amazing audio processing, so it makes your voice sound even better. You can add sound effects. It also has a record button, so if you want as a backup, you can record directly on your Rodecaster Pro. But this is where Ecam Live comes in, and this is the game changer. So if you don't know about Ecam Live and podcasting and this feature, you need to sit down for this, because it is amazing. So in Ecam Live, if you go into the preferences and go to audio, there is now a section for ISO recording. So what this does, if you don't have to have this, it will record the audio anyway. But with ISO recording switched on, it will record you and your guest and your video and your sound effects all on separate tracks, which means editing it for later is so much easier. So if you have a coughing fit or your guest has a coughing fit halfway through, you can edit that bit out. It doesn't matter because they're on separate tracks. So that's a game changer. Yes, by all means, use the feature on the Rodecaster Pro, and I definitely would recommend that as a backup. The system built into Ecam Live is awesome. Question from John: where does Ecam post the link for permission in a group? So yeah, you can add this. You can add this directly. I haven't got this to hand, so hopefully somebody from support can answer that question directly. But you've got the option, I think, to add this extra little bit to the description when you're posting to a Facebook group, and it will just add it in there with a link. And then what people do is, the people who are watching, they'll just click that link and then give permission for Ecam Live to see their name. And that's how it works. So it's just really, really easy. And Matt, I love you, Matt. I'm digging your Heil PR40 mic. I have that mic too. Yes, it's lovely. I love this mic. And Melissa, yes, I can see your name. So that's awesome. Let's have a look, see whatever we got here. So, Deep T says, I have a live video show, but no podcast yet. Could you please go over the steps for going from a live video show to a podcast? Now, that's quite a difficult job. That's a great question. Quite a difficult job, because actually, this is the 9th episode in the Podcaster Hour. And the previous 8 episodes, I've gone through all the different steps. But I'll go through it very briefly for you, because it is quite simple. Basically, the first thing that you need to do is to plan what your podcast is going to be about, or your live show is going to be about. Now, in your case, you've already got a live show, so you've done that. You've already planned that. There's an extra step, though. What you've got to think about is there is an extra audience now that if you want to add to the mix. So if you're going live, you have 2 audiences. You've got the people from the future. They're your replay audience. So you've got to think about them when you're going live, but you've also got to think about your live audience as well. And you've got to keep them both happy. When you repurpose into a podcast, you've also got to think about your listeners, your podcast listeners. So if you're demonstrating something on the screen while you're going live, you need to be aware of your podcast listeners. So that's the first thing. Just plan that out. Second thing is how you then repurpose that live show into an audio-only podcast. Now, if you're using Ecam Live, it's really easy. You've got the ability to record the audio, also the ability to record those as separate tracks, you and your guest. So you'll get those separate audio files. Now it's a case of editing that. There are loads of different tools out there. You could also hire a podcast editor. I started off editing the podcast myself. I used Adobe Audition. It's quite a geeky tool. It needs, you'll need a little bit of time to get used to that, but that's what I used. There's also, that's a paid tool, obviously, because it's Adobe, but then there's another tool, there's Audacity, AUD is how it starts, AUDACITY, I think is how you pronounce that. That's a free tool. There's also, I had Colin Gray on the show, who is the founder of Alitu, ALITU.com. Now, Alitu is great because it's a cloud-based audio editing tool. And so what you can do with that, allows you to clip the beginning and the end and edit bits out. It has audio processing. You can put the intro and outro as well if you want to do that. So or you could, for example, hire a podcast editor to do that as well. Now, an optional thing here is you may want, and you may already have this on your live show, you may want to have an intro and an outro. So if you have one in your live show, just make sure that the music and the voiceover, if you have that, works well for podcasting. Otherwise, get separate intros and outros that are audio, and then you can put those at the beginning and the end. So now you've got the MP3 of your podcast. Now you need to upload that to a podcasting host. So the tool that I use, the service that I use is CAPTIVATE FM. But there are loads of podcast hosts out there. Do your research. I personally love CAPTIVATE FM, and I'm going to hopefully have Mark Asquith on the show next week. So if you're around next week, we can ask some questions from Mark. There's loads of those services out there, but what that does is it stores your MP3 files. It creates the feeds that Apple Music and Google Podcasts and Spotify need to be able to allow people to subscribe to your podcast. So it hosts those MP3s, it creates the feeds, and also most of them will allow you to submit your podcasts to all those directories. And that's kind of it, except, of course, you've got to do things like promote your podcast and things like that. So I hope that helps. Preston says, is using the Zoom H4n for podcast streaming okay? So are you using that, Preston, as an audio interface? So are you outputting Ecamm into that and then recording it onto your SD card on your Zoom? You could do that, or I mean, I've got the Zoom. I've got the same one as you. I just used it as an audio interface, and I personally prefer just to record it directly. Use Ecamm to broadcast it, to save directly onto my computer as separate tracks. That's the way I prefer it. But you could use the Zoom as a backup in the same way as I use my Rode as a backup, just in case anything were to go wrong. You've got that. Doc has answered the question of Curtis's question. Stick to OWC, Core Digit, Elgato, or Kensington. And I totally agree with you. If you're really interested in finding out more about Doc's and Thunderbolt 3, check out Doc's videos on the Ecam channel. I've been watching them in great detail recently because they're awesome. Okay, so John says, I do a live podcast, JR's coffee shop podcast, that I use Ecam and the Rodecaster Pro to multi-stream using Restream and then repurpose the audio, MP3, and video VOD for later audiences. I typically get 20 to 30 live viewers and then 300 to 400 viewers afterwards. So take advantage of all the opportunities to reach your audience. Thank you for that, John. That's awesome. So there are different audiences. I mean, 20 to 30 live viewers is an excellent number. So you've got those live viewers, and then you've got the replay audience, which is generally a lot more. And then you've got other opportunities across all those different channels of the replay. And if you've got a podcast, you'll typically get a completely different audience listening to that. Question from DAS Productions. Question, I'm just starting my first podcast, and I'm really pleased with the journey so far. So I hear people talking about podcast subscribers. Do I need to have a CTA to subscribe to my podcast? Thank you. Yes, you do. Absolutely, you need to do that. So you can encourage some of your live audience or your replay audience to subscribe to your podcast. And I do this every week. So at the beginning and at the end of my live show, I say something like, and don't forget the Confident Live Marketing Podcast. All you need to do is go to iag.me/podcast to subscribe. Now, let me just make it show you. Actually, I'm not saying that my podcast page is perfect. I'm always looking at ways to improve this. But this is my podcast page. This is iag.me/podcast for my Confident Live Marketing Podcast. Now, this is a live show that becomes a podcast and then becomes a blog. And so I've got basically, first up here, what this show's all about. I've got sponsors there. I've then got subscribe now. So I've got an easy way to subscribe to on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, on Android, and all the other things. I also use Podchaser as a great podcast directory. So definitely check out Podchaser. It's like the IMDb of the podcasting world. And so I make it really easy. And then further down here, I've got the individual shows. So if I click on this one here, when I had Mark Asquith on the show, now this will probably take a while to load. I'll just go back here. But basically here is, this is a blog post. So I've got the title up there, I've got the description, got some timestamps. I've then here, if it decides to load, there we go. I've got the embed of the podcast player. What's cool here is on Captivate, by the way, is if I click on these timestamps, it goes to that point in the podcast. Then I've got the blog post here, and then right at the bottom, which is probably not going to work, but anyway, at the bottom, I've got the video as well. So there we go. Right at the bottom, I've got this is the video on YouTube. So yeah, definitely. So I kind of answered more beyond what your question was, but absolutely, I definitely would agree that you have a CTA, call to action there. Steve says, I did a podcast for 4 years on organic gardening. Awesome. And use Audition every week. I loved it. So you're not doing that anymore. Audition, I think Adobe Audition, if you can learn if you have Adobe Audition and you're not afraid of learning it, my friend Mike Russell has amazing YouTube videos on how to learn how to use Adobe Audition. Check that out if you haven't already. John has said, I've launched my multi-stream video podcast using Ecam Live and have applied for approval from LinkedIn 2 months ago and still haven't heard. How long did it take for your podcaster hour to get approved? So, well, actually, technically speaking, so I applied personally on my profile, Ian Anderson Gray, a long time ago. I'm trying to remember when this was. It was not last year. It was 2019. I was actually I was an early adopter. I don't quite know how it happened, but I applied early and I got accepted. And I think it was maybe a little bit easier back then, but there's been a backlog. So I would ask you, how many times have you applied? If you've just applied once, you need to apply a second time, possibly a third, and possibly a fourth time before you get accepted. And so what I'd recommend is that you have a live show on other networks like Facebook, and also that you upload pre-recorded content on LinkedIn. You've got to show LinkedIn that you are a creator. You are creating regular content on LinkedIn and on other profiles as well. Steve says, if your subject is more visual, like using video or photography related, am I wrong in thinking that wouldn't work well as an audio podcast? So it kind of depends. So thinking about my live show is the Confident Live Marketing Show. I do talk about video, I talk about tech, I talk about mindset. So there are some times where it's a visual thing where it's a bit more difficult to turn that into a podcast. But you know what? It's on the whole, it's been really successful. I had Annette McDonald, who is the founder of Easel. And Easel, if you haven't heard of it, is an amazing online graphics tool, similar to Canva, but in my opinion, better. It's just my opinion. But so I had her on the show and she was demonstrating how to use the tool. But I found that I was able to describe what she was talking about on the screen really quite well, and it worked really well as a podcast. And you can always say to your podcast listeners, if there's a very visual one, you can say, once you've listened to this podcast, do go back and watch the video and you'll be able to see what we've been talking about in the show. However, if everything about your live video is very, very visual, you have to think, is it going to work as a podcast? You just have to think about that. And I think really only you can answer that question. Explanatory Live says, should your podcast have the same name as your YouTube channel? No, not necessarily. It kind of depends what you're wanting to do. So, yeah. So again, I'm talking personally. My YouTube channel is just called Ian Anderson Gray. It's my name. On my channel, I actually have a number of different shows. I have the Confident Live Marketing Show. I have the Podcaster Hour. I have a few other ones. And so what I would suggest that you do within your YouTube channel, you have a playlist dedicated to your podcast or the live show of your podcast, if that makes sense. And Doc says, Scott Bourne has one of the biggest photography podcasts for nearly 20 years. It can be done. Yeah, totally agree. It can be done, but it kind of depends on what you're trying to do. There can be a compromise. If you're going live and turning it into a podcast, that there is a balance. So that's all I would say. It absolutely can be done. I do it, but just think about that. Matt says, I use Adobe Audition because it can automatically shorten the pauses between sentences. Amazing feature. Do other apps do that? That's a really interesting question. That's a really interesting thing, Matt. So, two things. Yes, there are other apps that do that. So an app that I've talked about on this show before is Descript. Now, let me see if I can get Descript up on the screen because it is amazing. And if you haven't discovered Descript before, then you need to discover it. So Descript.com. It is, you can basically put video into it and audio or audio, and you can it will then transcribe that into words. And then what you can do is you can then edit the words. If you, for example, you can delete words, you can change words, and it will then amend the audio or the video at the same time. So if you, for example, if you stumble over your words, if you go and a lot, there's an amazing feature in Descript that will remove all filler words and remove pauses and things like that. It is amazing. So definitely check out Descript. I personally, because I'm a control freak, I preferred using Adobe Audition because I just wanted more control over it, but I found that it took more time. Descript is a quick and easy way of doing it. Adobe Audition gives you more control, but it is more fiddly. But you mentioned shorten the pauses, and this is an interesting point. I would just be careful that you don't overdo this, because sometimes silence and pauses are important. Now, if, for example, I pause like this, that's probably a bit too long. But if I pause like this and carry on with my sentences like that, I think that's kind of okay. And actually a little bit of silence within your podcast and within your audio isn't a bad thing. I think we need to embrace those a little bit more. So yeah, I hope that helps. And Matt says, my podcast name has the word podcast in it. Is that a bad thing? Show name, All Things YouTube Podcast. Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. I've been thinking about this a lot. So, because some people recommend that you don't put the name podcast in your podcast name because it is obviously a podcast if it's not a podcast. What I do is for the podcast, I call it the Confident Live Marketing Podcast, and for my show, my live show, I call it the Confident Live Marketing Show. And so it's advertised differently. So on YouTube, you could call it the YouTube show, the All Things YouTube show. And if it's a video one, and then on the podcast, you could call it the All Things YouTube podcast. I don't think it matters overly, but that's just something to maybe think about. So hope that answers your question. Awesome. Right. So let's go on to the next question, which is, how can you eliminate the audio echo during interview mode? So this is not directly a podcasting question, but interview mode. What's really important here when we're talking about podcasting, audio quality is so important. Now, you could probably notice I'm wearing headphones. I wear headphones on all my live shows because podcasting, the quality of the audio is everything. Now, I know everyone doesn't like wearing over-the-ear headphones. If you don't, then just wear very discreet earphones. But what's really important is that you get your guest to do that too. And that can often be a challenge, to get your guest to wear earphones. But if they do, it will remove that echo that you might get. Now, Ecom Live has built-in echo cancellation, but still, sometimes there can be a bit of an echo there if your guest does not wear headphones. And so your audio, your voice is coming through the speakers on their end, and then their microphone is picking up that audio. Now, Ecamm Live will try and take away as much of your voice from the return feed, but it's just going to be much better if they wear headphones or earphones. And I put that in my notes. I've got a guest checklist that I send to all my podcast guests, and I ask them to wear earphones or headphones. Do they all listen to that advice? No, they don't, but I try my best. So I'm definitely a big believer in that. Really, really important stuff. Okay, next question. What's the easiest way to create a podcast for my live video? I don't have a lot of time to spend making podcast content. So I've talked about, earlier on I answered the question of the full workflow. And if you're interested in the full workflow, one of the earlier podcaster hours was the full workflow of what I do. But if you want the quick and easy way of doing this, then there is this tool here called Repurpose Dot Io. Now, this is only if you really, really don't have that much time. But what Repurpose Dot Io does, it's if you go live on YouTube or Facebook, Repurpose Dot Io will listen out to when you've done a live video, and then you can set up for it to then send that to your podcast host or upload to Dropbox or something like that. It's just a quick and easy way. So it will take that and then upload directly to your podcast host and do it that way. So that would be one way, is repurpose.io. But remember, in Ecamm Live, you have the ability for it to save as an MP3 file. So you can then just take that MP3 and upload directly onto your podcasting host, like Captivate FM or whatever it is. I would recommend editing it a little bit, the beginning and the end. You could use a tool like Alitu for that. But yeah, it's really depends on how much editing you want to do. And that's when it comes to your live show, you need to think about that. How much editing do you want to do? If you don't want to do much, then just make it as close to the podcast episode as you can on your live show. So I hope that helps. Next question. If you've got any more questions, pop them in the comments. Happy to answer those. So we've got two more questions, pre-prepared questions, which is this one. How do you recover? This is a great question. How do you recover when everything goes wrong? With podcasting being so dependent on the audio piece and consistency, what happens if your live goes bad? Well, the first thing is, don't panic. It happens to all of us. It just happened to me. It's either going to be my fault, it's going to be my internet's fault, it's going to be my microphone's fault, it's going to be my guest's fault. Something occasionally goes wrong. And if everything goes wrong, then you just may need to re-record it. So I've had it when my guest had really, really bad internet speeds. It was all glitchy. We just had to cancel it and start again, reschedule it for the following week. And that's okay. Sometimes those things happen. I've had it when we had a lightning strike and the power went out halfway through. And actually, this is so funny. This was Amanda Robinson, who is a Facebook ads and bot expert, if you've not come across her. So she came on the show. I had a power outage because of a lightning strike. The second time, there was an internet blackout across the whole of the UK for the ISP that I use. And so the internet went down halfway through that. And so we had to reschedule it again for the following week. So sometimes that happens. But what I would suggest to you is just have loads of backups. So if you have like the Rodecaster Pro, you can do a backup recording on your system, on the Rodecaster, as well as on Ecamm. Also, just make sure you're doing lots of testing beforehand. Having a checklist, a tech checklist, will save so much time. So, for example, I always check my audio. I just make sure that my levels are okay. I make sure that my guest's audio is okay. I will just record it, listen to it back, make sure everything is okay. Really, really important to do that. I'd love to know if you're watching live or the replay, have you had any experience with this? But just expect sometimes things will go wrong. With the same way with video, things will go wrong. And so just make sure you have a checklist there. Okay, final question on here, which is, since you have just finished episode 100, this is of my Confident Live Marketing Show. I'm now on episode 105. What piece of advice would you give to yourself at episode 1? Yes. So, it's a really good question. And I'm kind of so I hadn't really given this much time to think about. I think I was actually, because of previous experience, I think I was actually quite good to myself right at the start. And this is what I'd say to you, because I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm going to admit it now. I procrastinated like nobody's business when I first thought of the idea of podcasting. And so what I did right from the start was give myself permission for it not to be perfect, for my camera not to be amazing, my backdrop not to be amazing, and just get started and learn through the process. And so that's what I would suggest that you do, is to start off with what you've got and learn as you go through. But in terms of what I'd say to myself, I suppose it would just be to share all the technical things that I've learned along the way. So, for example, having a really good structure is so important. I now plan the structure of my live shows. I've tweaked that over time. That's really, really helped. And so that's what I would say to myself. Have a really planning is everything. Planning is everything. Make sure you have a really solid plan. But the other thing is consistency. It's if you are consistent every single week in going live and turning it into a podcast, you will learn from that experience and get better over time. If I listen to episode 1 or 2 of my podcast, I'm probably going to be cringing at that. But I've learned so much along the way. Melissa, oh my goodness, how are you getting on with your internet? Melissa can understand to having no internet. I know you've had problems. Are you connected now? I hope you are. What is this, Doc? Remember Janet had a wardrobe malfunction in the middle of the Super Bowl. Just had 100 million viewers. You shake it and keep going. It's not the end of the world. Yes, exactly. So you just need to keep going. If things go wrong, actually, do you know what? This is what I would say to myself back at episode 1, is don't take yourself too seriously. Now, I'm very good at being a Brit, probably helps here. I'm quite self-deprecating. I don't take myself too seriously, except I kind of did because I wanted everything to be perfect. I was really worried about how people would judge me on my audio quality, on my background, on my camera. And the thing is, we love the tech. We want everything to be really cool. And I've spent a lot of time on all those things. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is you turning up, giving value, and being there for your audience. Your audience don't really care if you're using a high LPR40 or whether you're using Elgato key lights or whatever. The most important thing is that you turn up and you deliver value. Now, all the tech, if you keep the tech simple, if you use a tool like Ecom Live, which just gives you that professional quality and makes it easy for you, of course that's going to make a difference. But you turning up, being consistent, and being there for your community is so, so important. And so that's what I would probably say to myself. Well, I think that is it. I don't know whether there are any more questions, but just as we finish, I'd love to know what your next steps are going to be with your podcast. Have I convinced you to launch a podcast from your live show? I'd love to know about that. And if you're interested in launching a podcast from your live show, I'd love to let you know about a course that I've got that's launching very soon in just under 2 weeks time, in fact, and it's called Launch Your Live. It's all about how to launch your live show, but also how to repurpose that into a podcast. So if you want some extra help, if you need some hand holding, if you want to go through all of these things in detail in a community with other people, then you need to sign up for Launch Your Live. I can see some other comments coming through, which I'll get to just after this, but here is a little bit more information about my Launch Your Live course. Do you want to launch a professional live show and a podcast? You know, a regular live show is so powerful for so many reasons. First of all, it's a great way to grow your audience and community, people who actually want to work with you and buy from you. And of course, once you launch it, it becomes a powerful repurposing engine. Launch Your Live is a 10-day course that teaches you how to launch a successful live show. But not only that, it also helps you to launch your podcast from your live show. In the course, we'll cover how to plan, promote, produce, and repurpose your live shows and podcasts, and I'll be sharing with you my templates and processes with you. I'll cover all the gear and tools that you need, including cameras, lights, microphones, and live video tools such as Ecam Live, Restream, and OBS Studio. I'll show you how to use those things to level up your impact, authority, and profits. I'll be sharing my top camera and communication tips with my Confident Live warm-up formula, and that includes things like improving your posture, breath control, diction, and more, and getting over maybe that fear and anxiety that sometimes you feel when you press that go live button. The course is drip fed over the first 5 days, and I'll be giving live training in the group every single day for that first week. The second week is all about doing and practicing, putting all of that you've learned into producing a successful live show and podcast. So I can't wait to work with you. What are you waiting for? Join the waiting list or sign up below, and let's launch your live. So there you go. That's the Launch Your Live. That's going to be happening in just under 2 weeks. Just go to iag.me/LYL, and I'd love to see you there. Just a few things before we finish, Melissa. We have a new router. That's what we call them in the UK, or router. But my mouse is not working as yet, so I'm relying on my laptop. Oh my goodness, you're having a tech nightmare, Melissa. And Yasmin says, thank you for sharing. Jasmine, sorry. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, Ian. I'm watching the replay as you are live. I currently have a standalone podcast. Awesome. Matt is saying, next steps, just keep cranking out awesome content. Absolutely. That's what you got to do, is do that. So I think that's just about it, but I just want to share a few other things that I'm playing with and what I'm doing. As I say, next week, Mark Asquith is going to be on the show. We're going to be talking about how to use podcast hosts and how you can promote your podcasts as well. So I can't wait for that. And yes, if you've got any thoughts on what's going to happen after the Podcaster Hour, we've got loads of ideas and thoughts, but let us know. Just put it in the comments. I hope you've enjoyed the Podcaster Hour. I've absolutely loved it and been interacting with you watching. The Ecam community is so awesome. Tomorrow, on my Confident Live marketing show, I'm actually joined by the CEO of Social Media Examiner and Social Media Marketing World, Michael Stelzner. And we're going to be talking about Clubhouse, how you can use Clubhouse to grow your community. So if you go to facebook.com/ in fact, don't do that. Go to confident.live/subscribe. That's confident.live/subscribe. And you can find out, you can be notified when we go live tomorrow with Michael Stelzner. I'm very excited about that. I've also been playing around with some overlays in Ecam. So I've not shared this with anyone yet, but this is for my live show and podcast. And since we're talking about podcasts, these are the kind of transitions that you could potentially do in the middle of your show. Now, I don't know if this is going to work. Let's see if it's going to work.
You're listening to the Confident Live Marketing Podcast.
I think that worked. So there we go. That's I'm doing a few little extra things. So you can have these little overlays. It's a video overlay that you could do. Now, Adam says, is there any way to have more than 2 external audio devices connected to Ecam? Oh, sorry, Adam. That was actually in my list of questions, and I completely forgot to answer it. So thank you, Adam, for reminding me. So the answer is this is not so much a podcasting question, but it's an audio question. So in sound levels, you can add 2 sound levels. So devices. So the way you do that, let's just go to, just as I finish now, let's go to live demo mode. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Now, in this little window here, this is the sound levels window. So I've got my movie sound levels. I've got my Rodecaster Pro stereo one there. I've got sound effects as well. So for example, if I play a little sound effect, what should I play? Got loads of really fun things here. Some very kind of somber music there. And so that's sound effects. And then you've got interview mode there, system audio. But you can add another audio interface there. So the question is, can you add more than 2? And the answer is no, not directly within Ecam. But you can if you use a tool like, if you use Loopback, a similar tool to Loopback. So if I just go to Loopback now, so Loopback is a paid tool from a company called Rogue Amoeba. Hold on a minute. I'm clicking the wrong buttons here. Just as we finish, is this going to work? There we go. Okay. So what you can do with Loopback is you can create your own audio devices. So what you could do here, for example, if I create a new one, so let's create a new virtual device. Okay, I'm going to call this test. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to add my MacBook Pro microphone. Just going to switch that off for now, just in case. I think it should be okay. Okay, so that's my MacBook Pro microphone. I'm also going to add, let's see what else I can add. Another interface, maybe the Rodecaster Pro. So hopefully, yeah, you can still hear me okay on that. So there we go. I've got those 2 things. Now this comes out as an output channel here. So this is called test. Now within Ecam Live now, I should be able to, let's have a look. Now it's not there yet. Okay, but let's just go back to, so I've created that new audio interface. Let's go to live demo mode again. And okay. So here in the sound levels, if I click on the downwards arrow here, you can see all those different audio interfaces there that I've got. Now the test one that I've created is not there yet, because what I think will need to do is I'll need to restart Ecam and then then it will appear there. But yes, you can. So the great thing about Loopback is you can combine external audio interfaces. You could route the audio from like Google Chrome or browser or from Zoom into there as well. So I hope that helps, Adam. That answers your question. But I think we're out of time. I think we are. I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. And I'll see you next week. My goodness. It's gone very quickly today. So until next time, I encourage you to launch your podcast using the power of Ecom Live. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks for watching the Podcaster Hour from Ecam, helping entrepreneurs, business owners, and live streamers launch a podcast with success using the power of Ecam Live. That's it for this week, but do tune in next time. See you soon, and toodaloo!